If you ever see a man in a Domino's delivery jacket standing outside your house at 2 a.m., don't open the door, unless you're ready to lose your innocence, or your trust, or both. That's not the opening line of some detective movie. It's what I scribbled in my journal the night everything fell apart. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 16. And I used to live in a town where no one ever told the truth. We called it Shadewood, Oregon. Sounds peaceful, almost poetic, right? But really, it was a gilded cage. Every house had a white picket fence, manicured lawns, and adults who wore fake smiles like masks. Everything looked perfect until you stepped past the front door and saw the bruises on your mom's cheek, half hidden under foundation. In Shadewood, everyone knew what was going on inside their neighbor's home. But they stayed silent. They always stayed silent. Until Ryder showed up. The new delivery guy. Tall, lean, tied back long hair, always wearing an old Bluetooth earpiece. Barely spoke a word. No one knew where he came from. He replaced the last delivery driver, the one who accidentally disappeared after a fight with a housewife's jealous husband. But nobody asked about the old guy. They just eyed Ryder with suspicion, then looked away. My mom called him dangerous. My dad didn't bother with labels. He just said, "If I catch you talking to that guy again, you're not stepping outside this house." But I felt differently. I thought Ryder was the only one who saw the truth. And the night I saw him standing at Lena's doorstep, my best friend's, holding 2 pizzas and wearing a look that screamed something was wrong, I knew things were about to change. And no one in this town, not even me, would be safe anymore. Shadewood was the kind of town that taught you silence was part of being polite. The grown-ups trained us to lower our heads when questioned, to smile when insulted, and to say, "It's okay," even when we saw someone sobbing alone in a garage on a scorching summer afternoon. Everything here looked fine, better than fine. Every yard had a flower bed, every window lit up right on schedule, and weekends were filled with barbecues, cold beers, and firm handshakes. But I always felt like something was off. Once I saw Mrs. Rodriguez, my friend's mom, flinch when her husband handed her a plate. It wasn't the kind of startled reaction you have when someone surprises you. It was the reflex of someone who's been hit before. I told my mom. She stared at me for a long moment, then said gently, "That's not your business." In this town, hiding things was second nature. My mom would cake on makeup every Sunday for church. Lena, my best friend, wore long sleeves even when it was pushing 90 degrees out. And I learned to read the eyes of adults to figure out whether they were telling the truth or just trying to survive one more day. Ryder, the delivery guy, showed up in the middle of one of those sweltering summer days. The old delivery guy vanished without a trace. No notice, no goodbyes, just gone. Ryder was nothing like anyone in Shadewood. He didn't pretend. He didn't force a smile. He didn't avoid eye contact, and that made the adults hate him instantly. "That guy stares at other men's wives too much," my dad muttered one night over dinner. "I heard he sat outside Mrs. Nguyen's house for 8 straight minutes," someone else said. "She just had her 3rd baby. Poor thing's probably vulnerable." I didn't say anything, but I started paying attention. And then I noticed something strange. Ryder always showed up at weird times, when the husbands were away, when no one else was home, when someone had just been screamed at in their own front yard. I started logging his deliveries. I wrote down the times, the houses where he lingered longer than he should have. I even made a secret Excel sheet and hid it inside a folder labeled Chemistry Homework. I didn't know why I was doing it, only that something in me wouldn't let it go. I didn't know who Ryder really was, but I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't like any other man in this town. And I knew this too. If there was anyone in Shadewood who was actually listening, it was him. I didn't know the old delivery guy's name. No one in the neighborhood ever mentioned it after he vanished. They just called him the previous one, as if his disappearance was inevitable, like the arrival of winter or maple leaves falling in October. No one searched, no one called the cops. Someone new just showed up, same route, same schedule. And that was that. Ryder Moore arrived like he'd always been there, wearing a worn-out beanie, a faded jacket over his red Domino's uniform, and those fingerless gloves, even in the middle of July. He never said much, usually just, "Here's your pizza, sign here, thanks." That was it. But it wasn't his silence that caught my attention. It was how he looked at people. He didn't glance at your chest. He didn't scan the room or avoid your eyes. Ryder looked you straight in the face, like he was checking to see if you were okay. Really okay. And when someone said, "I'm fine," he didn't buy it right away. He'd set the pizza down, nod once, and leave. But his gaze always lingered a moment longer. I started to notice patterns. Ryder stopped mostly at houses with tired-looking women, middle-aged or new moms, the ones with messy buns, pale skin, hands tucked into sleeves. But if it was a young woman living alone or a man answering the door, he kept it quick, barely crossing the threshold. The first time I heard Ryder have a real conversation was outside Mrs. Nguyen's house. She's the mother of a girl I used to know. I was across the street pretending to scroll through my phone. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough, and I heard Ryder say, "Bruise treatment works better if there's a medical reason on your record. You know what I mean, right?" No one replied. He left. She closed the door. But for the first time in years, I saw her hold her head a little higher when she walked through the neighborhood the next morning. That's when I started watching Ryder more closely. I kept notes in a journal, drew little maps of the houses he visited, how long he stayed, and, most importantly, what the women looked like afterward. I didn't know what Ryder was doing, but it definitely wasn't just delivering pizza. And in a town like Shadewood, where everyone's an expert at hiding things behind fresh paint and plastic smiles, being someone who actually sees, that alone makes you unforgivable. At first, I just wanted to figure out who Ryder was, but then it stopped being about curiosity. I started noticing something stranger than his visits. The changes that happened afterward. Miss Chen, the woman who never remembered my name at church, suddenly recalled exactly what grade I was in. She even asked if I liked English class, even though she'd never cared before. I saw her standing by her window more often in the afternoons, looking out with this alertness, like she was expecting something, not vacant, not lost, just present. Then came Mrs. Taylor. She used to avoid everyone, barely nodding if someone said hi. But one Tuesday morning, I saw her walking her little daughter to the bus stop. The girl wore a pink dress. There was a faint bruise on Mrs. Taylor's wrist, but she held her daughter's hand tightly. No hiding, no shame, just strength. And all of this happened after Ryder had visited their houses, more than once. I knew I had to dig deeper. I started tracking his schedule. Not just his delivery times, but his car, his route, how long he stayed at each stop. I even used an old phone as a hidden camera, setting it up near my bedroom window, facing the main street. Then, one day, I saw something I'll never forget. It was a Thursday evening, around 5:30. Ryder pulled up to Mrs. Rodriguez's house. A few minutes later, Mrs. Chen appeared from the alley beside the garage. Then Mrs. Nguyen showed up. 3 women, from 3 different homes, all stepping into Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen. The windows were shut, the curtains drawn. No one else was home. No husbands, no visitors. And when Ryder left, they stayed behind. About 40 minutes later, they came out, each carrying a small paper bag, like they'd been grocery shopping. But I swear, none of them had gone near a store. That night, I finally worked up the nerve to ask my mom. "Do you know what they were meeting about?" She looked up from her magazine, her eyes suddenly sharp, like something had just pierced through her calm. "Meeting? What meeting?" "I saw them at Mrs. Rodriguez's, all 3 of them, at the same time, and Ryder was there too." She paused, just for a beat. Then she answered, voice flat. "Don't get involved in grown-up matters." That should have shut me down, but instead, it confirmed something. Something real was happening, and my mom knew about it. She just didn't want me to. It felt like standing in front of a door that had just cracked open, and behind it was something this whole town had worked hard to bury. And me, a 16-year-old girl with a notebook and a stubborn heart. I decided to walk through it. That night, I went to Lena's house like usual. Friday study nights had become our excuse to escape cold dinners with colder parents. Lena's house always smelled faintly of cinnamon and played soft classical music from the kitchen speakers. But tonight, something was off. The moment I stepped in, I could feel it. The air was colder, heavier. Lena's mom, Mrs. Thompson, looked at me and forced a smile, stiff and unnatural, like her face was at war with itself. There was a fresh bruise on her arm, deep purple and still unhidden. She turned away quickly, tugging her sleeve down. Lena met me at the stairs. She didn't say a word, just pulled me up to her room. Once the door shut behind us, she whispered, "They've been fighting again, since lunchtime." A crash boomed from downstairs, a loud, sharp shatter. Lena jumped up, eyes wide with panic. "My mom!" We rushed down the stairs. The sight at the bottom froze my entire body. Her mom was sprawled on the floor, head leaning against the wooden stair rail. A faint smear of red stained her forehead. Mr. Thompson stood at the top step, one hand gripping the banister, his face flushed and furious. "She slipped," he said, voice disturbingly calm. "She's always been clumsy." I moved toward her, reaching for my phone, but he stepped in front of me, fast. His eyes were sharp, slicing. "No need to call. She'll come too. You two just sit and wait." That's when I realized his hand was gripping my wrist. I hadn't even noticed when he grabbed it. The hold was firm enough that I couldn't break free, but gentle enough to leave no marks. He'd done this before. I was sure of it. Lena was trembling, lips pressed into a thin line. I leaned in and whispered, "We have to do something. Do you have your phone?" She hid it. He checks every night. Time slowed, thick and sticky like gum. Mrs. Thompson didn't wake. Mr. Thompson paced in the living room with a beer in hand, muttering under his breath. Lena gripped my hand. Hers was ice cold. And then the doorbell rang. We all jolted. Mr. Thompson scowled. No one ordered food. But I saw a shadow through the glass. It was Ryder. I jumped up and yelled, "Pizza! Ryder, you're supposed to take me home. My dad's waiting." I said it loud, fast, like we were performing a play we hadn't rehearsed. Ryder understood instantly. He stepped inside holding a pizza box, eyes flicking briefly to Mrs. Thompson's body on the floor. He didn't say a word, just gave a slight nod and turned to me. "You ready?" "Yeah, thanks for showing up right on time." I forced a smile. We stepped out into the night, but I knew this wasn't just an escape. Ryder saw everything, and for the first time I knew without a doubt. I wasn't alone anymore. I ran home like something was chasing me. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might explode, each breath tearing at my throat. When Ryder pulled up in front of my house, I didn't even say thank you. I just bolted for the front door, yanked the handle, and prayed, "Please let Mom be home. Please, just believe me this time." The kitchen light was on. My dad sat at the table, a coffee mug in his hand, staring off in thought. My mom was doing the dishes, her back turned to me. Everything looked normal, too normal. I blurted it out without thinking. "Mom, I just saw Lena's mom get pushed down the stairs. Her dad did it. She passed out. They wouldn't let us call 911. Mom turned around, soap suds still clinging to her hands. Her face was blank. Before she could say anything, my dad spoke. His voice was calm, too calm, cold. "Where were you with the pizza guy?" I froze. "What?" "I saw his car. You stepped out of it. You're not allowed to go off with strangers, especially some grown man who keeps circling this neighborhood. He saved me. If Ryder hadn't shown up, I might still be locked in Lena's house, watching her mom lie there unconscious." Mom dried her hands with a towel but said nothing. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad stood up, loud and fast. "Who the hell does he think he is, taking my daughter around town at night? What even is he? A delivery guy? Or some creep preying on teenage girls? You don't get it," I shouted. "You don't see what's happening. Everyone in this town knows, and no one does anything. Ryder's the only one who cares." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough." The kitchen went dead silent. Then, in a voice soft but steady, my mom spoke. "Go to your room, Emily." I turned to leave, but before I climbed the stairs, I looked back. I saw the bruise on your arm the other day. Don't tell me you don't know what it feels like. To be trapped. To be scared. She didn't answer, just turned away, grabbed a rag, and began wiping the sink. Her hands were shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to my dad pacing downstairs, the sound of coffee being poured, a chair dragging, the wind slamming into the vents. And underneath it all, I heard something else. Something inside my mother breaking. Not glass, but something that had been silent for far too long. The next morning, she didn't wake me for school like usual. But when I walked into the kitchen, breakfast was already on the table. Toast with butter, my favorite. Next to it was a carton of milk and a folded note. One line. Don't believe everything your father says. Stay safe. It was her handwriting, neat, careful. But the ink was smudged in one spot, like her hand had trembled, or maybe a tear had fallen. I held the note in my hands, and I knew. She was beginning to stand with me. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. But soon. I started noticing the little signs, the kind I never paid attention to before. Or maybe they hadn't existed until Ryder came to town. Mrs. Chen no longer went to the grocery store alone. Now she always went with Mrs. Rodriguez, even though they'd never been close. Lena told me her mom had been stopping by Mrs. Nguyen's house more often to borrow cooking supplies, even though their kitchen was fully stocked. And my mom, who had always avoided every neighbor on our street, suddenly began taking walks every Thursday afternoon, right when Ryder's delivery route passed through. No one said a word. No one wrote letters or created a group chat. But somehow they were talking to each other, not with words, but with glances, with brief shoulder touches, with grocery bags quietly passed from one hand to another. They had started coordinating, and Ryder was the silent thread tying them all together. One time I saw him delivering to Mrs. Taylor, but instead of answering the door, she just cracked open the curtain and held up 3 fingers. Ryder gave a slight nod, set the pizza box on the doorstep, and walked away. Less than a minute later, Mrs. Taylor opened the door, pulled the box inside, and shut it fast. I didn't know what they were passing along. Cameras, documents, plans. But I knew one thing for sure. These women weren't passive anymore. A few days later, I was at the library, the only place I could get away from our Wi-Fi, which my dad monitored like a hawk. That's when Ryder walked in. No uniform, no pizza box, just a canvas shoulder bag and a distant look in his eyes. He saw me, then headed straight for the back shelves, the ones no one ever really browsed. I hesitated, then followed. He was thumbing through an old book on civil law. When he noticed me, he smiled. One of those rare smiles that wasn't cold. "You keep pretty close tabs on me," he said softly, eyes still on the page. I didn't answer. "You think you know what's going on, but you've only scratched the surface." "You're helping them, aren't you?" I asked. Ryder closed the book and looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm not a hero. I'm not a cop. But I was once a kid in a house just like yours. And I know, if you wait for the adults to save themselves, sometimes there's no one left to save." I swallowed hard. "So, they have a plan?" He nodded slowly. "We can't wait on the system. Can't wait on miracles. We're building something stronger, quieter. And when the time comes, they'll rise. Together." I don't know why I believed him so completely in that moment. Maybe it was the way he said "we," not they. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes, not fearful, not proud, just full of resolve, and the kind of pain that had been forged into purpose. That night, I saw my mom open the back door and signal to someone. It was Mrs. Rodriguez. She stepped into the kitchen without a word. I hid by the stairs, listening. No whispering, no crying, just the soft thud of a thin folder placed on the kitchen table. My mom picked it up, nodded once. The alliance had formed. No speeches, no celebration, no need for anyone's approval. But I knew Shadewood would never be the same again. We thought we were quietly in control, that every move was calculated, every step going according to plan. But it turns out they had started noticing too. And they weren't stupid. The first to disappear was Mrs. Rodriguez. She was strong, sharp, and probably the boldest of them all. She never flinched under judgmental stares, never cared about whispers behind her back. She used to teach self-defense to kids in the neighborhood while her husband was out of town, something many men in Shadewood found unsettling. She was also the first to stand up and walk out of church when the pastor said, "A wife should know when to submit." She was the spark. And then one Monday morning, she didn't show up to pick up her daughter from school, something she had never once missed. The little girl waited for over 45 minutes. School staff had to call the police. When they arrived at the house, the door was locked, curtains drawn. No one inside, no sign of struggle. Police contacted her husband, Victor Rodriguez. His answer was simple. She left a note saying she needed a few days away, said it was her decision. No one ever saw that note. There were no texts, no emails, no goodbyes. Her phone had been off since the night before. Social media wiped clean. Like she had been erased. Rumors spread fast. Mrs. Rodriguez ran off with a lover. She was depressed. She was tired of family life. But we knew better. My mom was the first to speak in our small circle. I saw a new bruise on her arm last Friday. She'd just received a mini camera from Ryder. She told me she finally had enough evidence to build a case. We sat in Mrs. Nguyen's kitchen. No one spoke loudly. Every phone had its battery pulled. Curtains shut tight. Only the dim yellow light above the stove filled the room. Mrs. Chen whispered, "If they did that to her, we're probably being watched too." I suddenly remembered the chill down my spine on empty sidewalks. The unfamiliar cars parked down the block, engine running, windows blacked out, the missed calls from unknown numbers, and most recently, a folded note slid under my bedroom door in the middle of the night. A crumpled scrap of paper, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "This is grown-up business. Stay out of it." No name. Didn't need one. I handed it to my mom, hands trembling. She read it in silence, then carefully burned it in the kitchen sink. Didn't say a word. From that night on, she started hiding my phone in the microwave whenever I wasn't using it. "Signal blocker," she said quietly. We stopped pretending we were safe. They knew, and they had made their move. But the one thing they didn't expect was the unity of the women they thought would always stay silent. When you live in fear for too long, you start to sense danger, even before it takes shape. But that doesn't mean you can avoid it. That afternoon, my mom got a surprising invitation from Mrs. Frank, the wife of the man who owned the biggest construction supply store in town. They hadn't had a real conversation in over 3 years. "Just a prayer group," Mrs. Frank said over the phone, her voice soft and sweet. "Just the moms. We need to stay united." My mom hesitated, but she knew what I knew. They were testing us. I begged to go with her, using the excuse that I didn't want her walking home alone. Lena, coincidentally, was brought along by her mom, too. A coincidence that felt way too suspicious. By the time we arrived, an old wooden house near the edge of town, the sky had already started to dim. Mrs. Nguyen greeted us at the door. She looked surprised to see me and Lena, as if she hadn't expected us to be there. Something was wrong. And before anyone could say a word, the door slammed shut behind us. Clack. Locked from the outside. We were trapped. A familiar voice echoed from the top of the stairs. "Stay right where you are. We'll handle this the proper way." "Mr. Frank." I lunged for the door, pounding it with both fists. "Let us out! This is kidnapping! Is anyone out there?" No response. The basement was damp, windowless, dimly lit by a single naked bulb hanging from exposed wires. No signal. No way out. My mom pulled Lena and me into a corner, her voice calm. Too calm. No more yelling. They want us to panic. "Mom, what do we do now?" I choked out. "Are we going to end up like Mrs. Rodriguez?" She didn't answer, but I saw her hand ball into a fist. Knuckles pale. That was her answer. We didn't know how long we were down there. Could have been 30 minutes. Could have been 3 hours. Then the doorbell rang. A sharp, glorious sound in the dark, like a life raft dropped into the middle of the ocean. Footsteps. The door creaked open. A familiar voice called down the stairs. "Pizza delivery for the Franks. 1 large, extra everything." "Ryder." Mr. Frank snarled. "We didn't order anything. Got the receipt right here, sir. Just need a signature." Ryder shouted cheerfully. Then came a loud crash, metal on metal. The thud of something slamming into something else. Mr. Frank cursed. Heavy footsteps thundered out of the house. Silence. Then, click. The lock turned. Mrs. Nguyen stood in the doorway, holding a spare key. Her face was pale, but her eyes were blazing. "Go, now." She helped Lena climb up first. I followed. My mom was the last one out of the basement. Outside, Ryder stood beside his dented truck, casually inspecting the crumpled front bumper like he'd just accidentally backed into something. "Your car was parked in a blind spot," he said flatly to Mr. Frank. "I'll call insurance." While Mr. Frank was busy checking the bent fender, the rest of us slipped into the shadows behind the house, disappearing into the alleyway. No one said a word on the way home. We didn't need to. We all knew this wasn't a secret game anymore. We'd just been declared war. After that night, we knew we couldn't stay silent anymore. They had locked 3 women, 2 adults and 1 teenage girl, in a private basement without hesitation. And if it hadn't been for Ryder and Mrs. Nguyen, I might have ended up in my own tragic accident scenario, just like Mrs. Rodriguez. Silence was no longer just complicity. It was betrayal. and we decided to break it. 3 days later, during the town's annual festival, when everyone gathered downtown to watch the parade, eat cheesecake, and politely clap for the town council's recycled speeches, we made our move. They never thought we'd dare. At exactly 11:45 a.m., just as the mayor was delivering a speech on sustainable community and traditional unity, the audio cut out. On the giant LED screen behind the stage, usually filled with sponsor logos, a video began to play. The first scene, Mr. Thompson, Lena's father, standing over his wife's body at the foot of the stairs. She's clumsy, always falling. Then, Mr. Frank in his living room, mid-swing, a slap caught by a hidden wall clock camera. And then, images in quick succession, bruised arms, prescriptions for anti-inflammatories, frozen bank accounts, handwritten threats, voicemails from abusive husbands. The footage was shaky, but real. The voices layered, urgent. The crowd froze in silence. Then a woman stepped onto the stage and picked up the mic. Rebecca Monroe, the deputy police chief's wife, her makeup just barely covering a fading bruise. Her voice shook, but stayed strong. I'm one of 7 wives who've been abused, controlled, and silenced in Shadewood for years. She looked out at the crowd. We brought evidence. We reported it. No one listened. The police dismissed it. The council stayed quiet. And those men, she pointed towards several men now visibly panicking below the stage, thought no one would ever call them out. A scream burst from the crowd. Mrs. Chen stood trembling, pointing at the screen. That's my hand. That's my house. They sent it to me. I thought I was losing my mind. More women began crying. Some stood up. Some pulled out their phones and started recording. The silent protest had begun. Ryder, standing at the edge of the crowd, still in his delivery uniform, removed the mic from a portable speaker, the one he had secretly patched into the town's PA system earlier that morning. No one stopped him. No one dared. When the police finally arrived, Rebecca had everything ready. Copies of documents, audio files, witness statements, and new reports. This time sent directly to the state prosecutor's office, bypassing the Shadewood PD entirely. There would be no cover-up. That evening, news stories poured in from neighboring towns. Systemic abuse in Shadewood exposed. Women fight back with proof. Underground network led by Domino's delivery driver? It sounded like fiction, but it was real. We didn't know what would happen next, but we knew one thing for sure. They locked us in the basement, but we're not afraid of the dark anymore. It started raining the morning after the evidence went public. Not heavy, but steady, relentless. Shadewood, once neat, spotless, and quiet, looked like a town waking up from a long, violent dream. For sale signs began popping up along the street. Some men vanished from their usual coffee shop corners. Police cars became a more frequent sight, but most of all, the women started looking at each other differently. No more avoidance, no more whispers, just small nods. Silent acknowledgements. We made it through. 3 days after the video release, 7 arrest warrants were issued, including for Mr. Frank, Mr. Thompson, and Mr. Rodriguez. It was the state police, not the local force, who came to carry them out. Each man was cuffed in front of their neighbors. No exceptions, no privileges. We, the ones who used to be called dramatic, emotional, attention-seeking, sat in the courtroom. The judge was an older woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her voice calm and steady. She listened to every audio clip, watched every shaky video, read every line of every testimony with eyes sharp as steel. No pity, no rush, only justice. Rebecca Monroe was the first to testify. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble. She just spoke, her voice even. The first time he choked me was when I asked why there was only $32 left in our bank account. Next was my mother. Her hands still trembled slightly as she held the folder of old Bruce photos, but her voice had never been steadier. I thought I was staying silent to protect my daughter, but really I was teaching her that women should endure. I'm sorry. Then Lena took the stand. I had never seen my best friend look so strong. I used to hear my dad threaten my mom every night. I thought it was normal because no one ever said it wasn't. Now I know. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is siding with the abuser. The trial lasted 6 days. The defense threw everything they could, from lack of evidence of intent to mentally unstable wives. But no argument could compete with hundreds of pages of documents, dozens of videos, buried complaints, and the eyes of the children sitting quietly in the back row. The smallest witnesses, the quietest ones, and the biggest reason for this fight. When the judge read the verdict, no one breathed. After reviewing all presented evidence, witness testimony, and the broader context of the case, this court finds the defendants guilty of systematic domestic abuse, witness intimidation, unlawful detainment, and obstruction of justice. One by one, names were read, sentences delivered, ranging from 5 to 18 years in prison with no immediate eligibility for appeal. The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the courtroom. No applause, no cheers. We just sat there, eyes red, hands held tight, not out of joy, but out of relief. Because finally, justice wasn't just a distant dream. That night, there were no celebrations, no parties, no meetups, just me and my mom, sitting in the kitchen, sipping the first cup of hot cocoa she'd made since her wedding day. She gave a soft smile. I don't even know how to start over. I smiled back. We can start in silence, as long as it's not because we're afraid. We didn't call it a victory. None of us felt like we had won anything, because the truth is, no one wins a war where you're forced to fight the people you once called family. But we survived. And for us, that was enough to begin again. 3 months after the trial, Shadewood looked different. No more backyard barbecues filled with fake laughter. No more wives lowering their eyes while their husbands held meetings in the garage. Houses that once glowed with polished perfection now sat empty, some foreclosed, some for sale. But in the homes that remained, something was beginning to heal. Mrs. Nguyen started a free cooking class for single mothers. Lena launched a blog sharing her journey through psychological recovery after abuse. And Rebecca Monroe, the woman who once sat silently in the passenger seat of her husband's squad car, was now building a legal aid network for women in rural areas facing domestic violence. And Ryder still delivered pizza. But now, sometimes he carried more than food. Sometimes it was a flyer from a local help center. Sometimes it was a legal appointment slip. Sometimes Just a pen with 4 small words printed on it. You're not alone. No one paid Ryder to do that. He did it because he knew sometimes giving someone just a little hope can save their life. As for me, I wrote this story down, not because I need anyone to believe it, but because maybe somewhere out there, a girl like me will read it, right when she needs it most. I used to think one person couldn't do anything. That silence was the only way to survive. But now I know. When the truth is spoken, it can become a blade sharp enough to cut through even the deepest rot. One night, as I was editing a new post in my room, my mom knocked on the door. She handed me a small piece of paper, a handwritten note. She lives in the next town over, just moved in. The signs are familiar. I think she might need someone. Below the note was an address and an unopened pizza box with a familiar logo in the corner. I looked at my mom. She nodded. It's your turn now. No one should have to wait to be saved, but everyone deserves someone who listens, even if it's just a stubborn 16-year-old girl, even if it's just a quiet pizza guy, even if it's just a handful of mothers who stayed silent for too many years. Because when the smallest people stand together, they can build a network no one can break. Not because they're stronger, but because this time, they're not afraid anymore. You're not alone. You never were.